All right, in this demonstration, I'm going to show you a little bit about how you can get started just to begin with PHP, as well as what to watch out for in terms of error reporting. Before we do anything, we need to go ahead and start by opening up our XAMPP server system. So we're going to authenticate first because it always requires administrator authentication. And here it is, it popped up. So I'm going to go here to manage servers. I want to make sure that Apache's running. Honestly, it doesn't matter if MySQL's running. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and stop MySQL. And the reason I'm going to stop MySQL is because I'm not using it and it's just going to take up extra processing on my computer, and I'm going to recommend that you do the same. My computer's pretty fast, at least as of the time I'm doing the video. We'll see how it is in a few years. But you know, if you're ever having any kind of performance issues, you should definitely not run any services like this if you don't have to. Okay, so I'm just going to minimize that. And I want to remind you, first of all, if we go back here to localhost, right, this is on my own computer. So if you were to do the same thing, you would see what's on your own computer. And if you remember in the last set of tutorials, when I showed you how to set XAMPP up, if you go and click on the dev folder, I showed you how you could create a dev folder for development files. The other thing too, if you want to just reiterate as a reminder, we can look to see where this is actually being mapped. So if I go over here to my Finder window, and I can actually see, I'm going to scroll up. All right, and then at the very bottom, or I should say scroll down. I'm on a Mac, so I have to scroll like it's scrolling up. Anyway, so if I go to the bottom, you'll see the XAMPP folder. And if you are on Windows, the pathway that you're going to be finding your stuff in is if you go to My Computer or you go to the C drive, then what you're going to do is find in the root directory of that C drive is going to be your XAMPP folder. All right, so that's where you're going to find it. On a Mac, however, it's going to place it in the applications folder. So on a Mac, it would be going into the Mac hard drive and then into applications and then the XAMPP folder. And so if I open the XAMPP folder, then you're going to have something that looks very similar to this. Although Windows computers won't have this XAMPP files folder. It's going to look a little bit different, but inside of this on a Mac is where your actual stuff is. Like if you look at all these are all shortcuts with the little arrows there, so you don't have to actually go inside of here. But just so you know, that's where your htdocs folder really resides. On a Mac, it's inside the XAMPP files, and then on Windows, it's going to be in the XAMPP folder. Okay, so this htdocs folder, as a reminder, is what gets mapped to localhost. So if I were to do this once again, just load the localhost, and I want to compare what's inside of my htdocs, then you can see that it's a tit-for-tat kind of setup. I can see that it's got applications, Bitnami CSS, same here, dashboard, dev as folders, and so on and so on. And so that should tell you also that if you're going to use this dev folder so that you can load your scripts and stuff, you would want to go inside of this dev folder here, and that's where you would start saving your files. And also, if you remember, we put a shortcut in Windows. I think I showed you on the desktop, but you could put it anywhere. You make a shortcut to htdocs on this Mac. I made a shortcut here. I also made it over here in my dock, right? So if I wanted to ever look at it that way, I could. And so that way you don't have to go all the way through the top level root directory of your computer. You can always just go through and grab your stuff by accessing your shortcuts and dropping your files inside of here. Okay, so now that is set up, what I want to show you to do is go ahead and whatever your favorite editor is. I'm going to be using Dreamweaver for most of the stuff in this class because there are some efficiency tools. So I'm going to go over here and say File, New. And even though mine is defaulting on PHP, yours probably is going to be defaulting onto HTML. I'm going to show you. If I choose HTML, the reason I want to show you this is because I want to show you what can happen if you choose an HTML file type in Dreamweaver, or actually in a lot of other kinds of applications as well. It's going to think that it's an HTML file type. I want to make sure my doc type is using HTML5. That should be default. If you have an old version of Dreamweaver, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be showing you, some of it might not be true. Like for instance, the doc type might be some other default doc type. Make sure you choose HTML5. create. Okay, and it gives me this basic outline here. I'll call it error test or something like that. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this file. And if I go to my htdocs and then I want to go inside of dev, I'm going to call this, let's call it error HTML or something like that. Okay. I'll give it a dash. And I'll go ahead and just save it like that inside of my dev folder. Now, the first thing that I want to do, create opening PHP tags and the end of PHP tags. And you'll notice one of the things right off the bat that it's doing is that the tag colors are the same as all of these other tag colors. And it's also showing me an error on line 9 and line 11. It doesn't recognize what those are. So the first thing that is a hint is that it's coloring the line numbers differently in bright red. Any other kind of editor that you're using, whether it's an older version of Dreamweaver, or if it's Komodo Edit or Brackets or Sublime or Atom or whatever, hopefully a newer version is going to automatically show you errors based on either coloring or blocking out a color on the line number, or maybe down here in the status it'll show you something. So always pay attention to your error colors. And if you hover in Dreamweaver in the newer version, like if you have CC, then it'll tell you, all right, special characters must be escaped. Well, that question mark is what it's referring to as a special character. And the problem is that it's not really a special character. This is the way you're supposed to write an opening PHP tag. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just pretend like, I'm not paying attention to all these errors that are obviously showing me something is wrong, including this last question mark being a different color. And I'm going to just go ahead and try to type in some PHP. I'll use a function. You don't have to understand this function yet. You don't have to know what it's doing. But this is a PHP function. It's called PHP info, and it has an open and close parenthesis, and then it terminates. All right, that function is the one that actually produces that big page with all of the compiling information that I showed you before in a different demo that has, all of the properties of the PHP installation. And this right here will just it'll generate that page with all those data fields populated. All right, so let's just see what happens. Remember, this is an HTML file. If I hit save, all right, and then I come back over here into my local host, I'm going to refresh, all right, and then my page shows up. All right, I'm going to click on that. Well, it's not showing anything. It's not because I have some, problem with my display errors. The problem is that I'm using an HTML file extension. PHP files have to have a PHP file extension. You can absolutely include HTML markup inside of PHP files, but they must end in .php. That is how Apache understands how to basically hand the PHP tags over to the PHP parser so that it can work. All right, but if I were to right-click and inspect this, for instance, and see what's going on, and I'm in Google Chrome, you could do this in, anything else. Well, what's happening is that Chrome is, it's basically rendering out this as a comment. It's commenting it out. Well, I didn't type comment marks in there. I didn't put HTML comments in there. But what Chrome is doing is it gets to that and it sees, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do with that. And so it creates a comment. This, by the way, just so you understand, is the inspector, and it is how it is rendering the DOM. It doesn't mean whenever you look at the inspector, it doesn't mean that that's the actual HTML of the document. It doesn't mean that it's the actual code of the document. What it is it's the way that the browser is interpreting the existing code in the document, and it tries to render it. And what it'll often do, because they're so generous, these browsers, is that it will try to do its best to fix problems, correct them, make assumptions about what you really wanted to have happen, so that it can go on and continue to load the rest of the page. I want to show you this because I also then want to go and show you, if you go up to View, Developer, View Source, I want you to see the difference. All right, there are no comment marks. This is my original HTML. And that's really important for you to understand. So to reiterate, the thing that you're seeing in the inspector is the browser's attempt to render the DOM. The DOM is document object model, right? So if you ever see this DOM thing, right, that means document object model. And so it basically creates a model of all of the document's objects, and it's rendering those as it understands them, right? Whereas this is the actual source, right? Exactly the way that it was written. And you're going to find in this class that looking in the inspector and looking at the source code is to see how PHP is or is not working, just to see what's actually being rendered and served up is going to be extremely helpful in helping you figure out what's wrong. All right, so let's see how we can fix that. Let's jump back over here to our Dreamweaver application. We know that this is the wrong file type, so we're going to do File, Save As, and I'm going to just change the file extension to PHP, and we'll save it in the dev folder. And you see automatically right off the bat that it fixes the color coding for the PHP tags. They're purple now in the way my color scheme is set up, and the colors on lines 9 and 11 have disappeared for the errors. And then if you see something that says dynamically related files can't be discovered because of blah, 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 don't worry. Don't worry about that right now, but I will show you later how you can manage your sites. Okay, so I'm going to close that. So let's save that, and let's go back over here. And I can't just hit refresh, right, because this is the HTML file. I need to change the file that it's actually loading. All right, and then you see right off the bat that now if I open this body up in the inspector, you can see it's got all this stuff that's happening. Basically, this is being generated by that PHP info function that I have in my PHP file. And of course, if you were to go to view source, you could see that there's actually a ton of source code there now, right? So all this stuff gets generated by that PHP info file. Let's head back over to Dreamweaver or whatever application you might be using. And I want to show you something also. Let's get rid of the PHP info file. And let's do something like, say, echo. Echo is a command, and you see it's telling me automatically up here that there's an error because I haven't finished my command yet. And the error is not actually showing up on line 10, it's showing up on line 11 because it's by the time it gets to the next line on line 11, it realizes that something's wrong up here on line 10, but the error is actually popping up on line 11. And so if I were to save this, for instance, and let's go back over here and hit refresh, it tells me that there is in fact a problem on line 11. And what's happening is it's giving me a parse error. And one of the reasons I want to show you this is I don't want you to just immediately see something like this and throw your hands up and run to a discussion board without making some effort to try to figure out what's going on. These parse errors, all of these syntax errors, they will give you information that are very helpful. And maybe you can sort of, look at this to try to help yourself figure out what's going on. So you can see here it's a syntax error. It's saying unexpected. Basically the end of the PHP tag, it's seeing the end of that PHP tag. It doesn't know what's going on because it's unexpected. It was actually expecting something else, right? So what that means is that this is the ending of the PHP tag. What it needs is more information after echo. So echo is a command that will print something to screen, all right? And so it literally will say it to the browser. In fact, it won't just print it in the display view, but it actually prints the stuff to the code view. So for instance, if I say echo, I'd put a space after that to separate my command from the thing that I'm going to print. And let's just go ahead and do some double quotes, right, like this, and then terminate it, right? So if I do a double quotation mark, and then a closing double quotation mark, and then a terminator, this is what's referred to as an empty string because there's nothing inside of here, right? If that's actually not empty, but if I hit delete to remove that text inside of the string, this is referred to as an empty string. You see that there are no errors now. And if I come back over here after saving and hit refresh, nothing's showing up, but that's okay because it's basically the same as me saying echo or print nothing.